Welcome to Stagecoach, where you'll find the best Western books on the market and the men and women who write them. This podcast is brought to you by Dusty Saddles Publishing, home of the best-selling authors in the Western genre. This is your host, Ginger Winters. Join us as we continue the story of Abilene Ambush by Scott Harris.
Chapter 17. Cat. The following morning found everyone on the second floor of the small hotel, crammed into room number 3. Cisco whispered to Huck that it was the first time he'd seen Maria smile since the accident. Maddie had the chair. Everyone else was spread between the two beds except Huck, who stood by the window, where he said, "Doc's not thrilled about it, but says if we have to, we can start out in 3 days." Cisco started to object. "You can't wait another 3 days. I know you need to get back to the ranch. Maria and me will catch up when we can, I promise." Huck laughed and answered, "Sarah, Maddie, we leaving here without Maria?" Cisco, who didn't know either woman, knew enough about women to understand the reaction made it perfectly clear that they'll all be leaving together. "Okay, thank you. Truth is, I don't know what we would have done if we could have made it without you. Don't know how we can ever repay you." Huck laughed again. "Cisco, we've ridden enough trails together and saved each other often enough. Ain't no one keeping a ledger. People are nice here anyway, and after the time we've had in Cheyenne, another couple of days isn't gonna matter. Now, I wrote that letter to Kat. You want me to read it and see if it says what you want?" Huck watched as a look was exchanged between Cisco and Maria. Cisco answered, "Huck, we can't read English. You write it in Spanish. We'll read it, but not in English. Never learned." Sarah spoke next.
"Maria, Cisco, how about I read the letter to you and you see if you want any changes?"
They both nodded, and Sarah took the letter from Huck and started reading.
"Kat, you should know this letter is from me, Huck Clemons, not your sister or Cisco. It's a hard letter to write, and there's some bad news in it. By now, you've probably received a letter from Maria, telling you they're coming to see you and hoping you'll leave Dry Springs and move back to Tuskegee with them. Things have happened since she wrote that, and some of it is horrible. There's no easy way to say this, so I've just come out with it. Little Nieto was killed in a terrible accident. He was riding with Cisco and the horse spilled. He died fast. Wish I didn't have to tell you. Cisco was hurt too. He'll be okay, but not for a while. Shattered his leg pretty bad. Doc said worse he's seen, but not many. Means they can't get to Dry Springs. It's too far for them to make the trip alone, especially since Cisco won't be able to do much, at least for a while. Kat, there's another thing, and this one is good news. Your sister is going to have a baby. She's been with Doc here, and he says she's plenty healthy and maybe halfway along. All this means their plans have changed, have had to change. We're in Casper now. That's in Wyoming territory, almost 500 miles from our ranch in Yellowstone. They're going to come back home with us. They'll be there in plenty of time for the baby, and it'll let Cisco's leg get better without him having to work too hard. We're all hoping you and Clibbs will leave Dry Springs and head up there. The ranch has plenty of room, and Maria wants to have her sister with her. They'll stay through the winter and then decide next spring if they still want to go back to Tuskegee. You can stay too. I think you'd like it. It's even prettier than Dry Springs. We've started a ranch and have 2,000 head of cattle. The main ranch house is built, so is the main bunkhouse. And so is my house, where my soon-to-be wife Sarah and I will live. Tom James is still with us. Please tell his folks he's doing well. And he'd kill me for telling you this, but he's fallen for a local girl."
At this point, Tom interrupted. "You can't put that in a letter." Huck laughed. "Too late, it's already written. Plus, it's true, and anyone who's seen you around here knows it." Huck relished his friend's embarrassment for a moment, and then Sarah kept reading.
"Kat, I know this is a lot in one letter, and I wish I had better news for you. But if you leave right away, you can be to the ranch before the baby. Maria wants me to tell you she loves you and hopes you will come. As soon as you receive this and decide, please send a letter to Maria in Bozeman in Montana Territory. We check the mail there often. With great hope, Huck."
When Sarah finished reading, Cisco and Maria looked at each other, gave slight smiles, and nodded. They took a pencil from the nightstand and each signed the letter. Huck handed Sarah the envelope on which she'd already written Kat's Dry Springs address. She folded the letter neatly and slid it inside. Huck took it back, saying as he did, "I'm gonna walk this over to the post office right now. If I remember right, it's inside of the Casper General Store. While I'm there, I'll check and see if any of us got any mail." Huck walked out, leaving his friends and family to catch up with each other, hoping the conversation would ease Cisco and Maria's pain, all the while knowing it would never fully go away. Once again, he thought of his father and wondered what life would have been like if he hadn't been killed. He thought maybe he'd have wound up working at the livery his father owned, maybe for most of his life, marry a local girl and have a couple of children. There was a time where that might have been enough. But now, Huck had been too many places and seen too many things to ever imagine living that life. As they were beginning to draw closer to Yellowstone, he began to wonder what his life was going to look like. He'd been so focused on setting up the ranch and marrying Sarah, he hadn't put much thought at all into what would happen next. Chapter 18. Box Decks. It was a short walk to the Casper General Store. Huck enjoyed the few minutes to himself. The weather was crisp, and while you could wear a coat and not get overly warm, you could also comfortably wear just a shirt. Which is what Huck chose to do, leaving his coat at the hotel. There were a handful of people on the boardwalk, shopkeepers getting ready for the day, men going to work, women starting their shopping. Everyone seemed relaxed, and Huck enjoyed the feeling of relative safety, knowing all too well how infrequent that was. He stepped into the general store, noticing 3 other men shopping, and 1 man behind the counter. He walked up to the counter and introduced himself, and was greeted with a warm smile and an outreached hand. "Name's Troy. What can I help you with?" "I'd like to post this letter. It's heading to Colorado Territory." "Pretty good timing, I'd say. Mail leaves here weekly and is scheduled for this afternoon." "Thank you. It's important that it gets there as soon as possible, so this is very good news. As long as I'm here, let me check and see if we got any mail waiting for us." Huck gave the clerk the name of everyone in their party and ended with, "And I'm Huck Clemons, so any from me or anyone else at the Circle CM." The clerk excused himself and headed toward the back, where he kept the stack of letters that built up over time. As he did, the 3 men in the store approached Huck. All 3 were dressed like they spent some time on the trail, and they all looked like they could handle themselves. Huck wasn't expecting any trouble in Casper, but he knew it paid to be cautious. He turned to face the 3 men, his right hand sliding down to his holster, saying, "Good morning, gentlemen. Something I can help you with, or are you waiting for the clerk to come back?" The smallest of the 3 spoke. "No one to talk to you. Heard you say the Circle CM?" Huck's shoulders tensed, and he looked at each of the 3 men. He didn't see any aggression, but remained cautious. "I did. It's my family's ranch. Take it you heard of it?" "Yes, sir, we have. We ride with the Boxed Y." "Sorry, boys. I'm fairly new to the territory, and I haven't heard of the Boxed Y. You from around here?" "We're not. We're from up your way. Our ranch used to be known as the Boxed X." As soon as Huck heard that, he started to reach for his gun. As he drew it, all 3 men raised their hands and smiled, just about the last thing Huck expected. The small man spoke again. "Slow down there, Huck. It is Huck, right?" "It is. And you did say the Boxed X, right?" "I did. But to be clear, I said it used to be known as the Boxed X. Guess you haven't heard what happened." "Now that I think about it, I remember hearing about another Clemons, one who was heading down to Abilene to meet a girl." "That's me, Huck Clemons. By another Clemons, I'm guessing you're familiar with my mother and father, Sophie and Brock? Sounds like you know a little about me, but I don't know anything about you, and what I know about the X ain't good. You might think me unfriendly, but until I know more, how about you keep your hands where I can see them?" One of the other men started to speak. He had a friendly smile on his face as he did. "Since you hadn't heard, we can understand you less than friendly. I promise you we're not looking for any trouble. If you let us buy you a cup of coffee, I think you'll find what we have to say to be good news." The clerk walked out of the back room, holding a single letter in his hand. He stopped cold when he saw the drawn gun. He started to turn around when Huck said, "Sorry, Troy. Looks like this might have been a misunderstanding. These men are about to explain why." Looking at the letter in the clerk's hand, Huck continued, "Is that for me?" "Yes, sir, it is." Huck holstered his gun, took the letter without looking at it, and shoved it into his back pocket. I'm not traveling alone and everyone else is back at the hotel. How about we head back there for that cup of coffee? Okay with us. Invite all of them to join if you like. We're buying. The four left together, and a few minutes later they were seated around 2 tables shoved together, along with Tom, Jimmy, and Harry. The girls stayed with Cisco and Maria in the room. Introductions were made, and the Circle CM men learned that the smaller man was named Hank Thompson, and the other 2 were Leo Watkins and Timothy Abernathy. When the coffee had been served, Hank started up the conversation. Foist, sorry if we startled you back there. Didn't mean to. I know there was bad blood between the ex and your ranch. Can't say we didn't have at least something to do with that, but things have changed since you rode out, and I guess we should have thought about that. Huck, still not completely relaxed, asked, Changed how? Changing the name doesn't seem like it would fix the problem. Normally, you're right, but not this time. Clint, Beck, and 9 of us. Huck's mind drifted to Beck, and the fact he hated the Circle CM, Brock, and most of all his mother, Sophie. Beck was greedy and mean, and couldn't accept a woman running a ranch, which Sophie did. He especially hated it when that ranch was bigger than his beloved Boxed X, which the Circle CM was. Clint and his men had tried on more than one occasion to kill Brock, and some of the others, but had been stopped every time. Huck didn't know if these 3 had been involved in any of the attempts, but he was having trouble seeing how this breakfast was going to turn out well. Chapter 19. Boxed Y. Hank continued. Rode up to your ranch. Clint was sure he was scared everybody off this time, and it didn't work. He was going to kill your father and anybody else he thought stood in his way. As some of us started to think the old man was losing it, but it turns out he had already lost it. Like I said, we rode up to the ranch, Clint out front, Brock met us, stood alone against the 10 of us. The man has sand, I'll give him that. Not the first time he stood up to the Boxed X, or against Clint. Clint wasn't used to having anyone stand up to him, till your father showed up. Not sure anyone has had in years, maybe ever. Well, when we get there, Clint ordered us to kill everyone on the ranch, including the women and children. It took everything Huck had not to leap over the table at the 3 men, but he restrained himself, though not without a struggle. Now, we ride for the brand, like we all do, like you do. Things have been sliding for a while. Most of us don't know when to quit, or at least we didn't. Next thing we knows, there's an old man, a couple of women, and even a little girl standing behind your father, all with guns in hand. That was it for all of us except Clint. We backed up our horses and let Clint know we were out. Riding for the brand's one thing, but women and children, well, that's something else. But Clint, he was dug in. Couldn't see straight no more, and all he knew was killing your father. He went for his weapon. Now, Clint was the fastest I've ever seen, but your father, whew, well, he pulled so fast I'm not sure I could have believed it. Except that peacemaker fired a single shot, and Clint fell dead. By God, Clint's gun hadn't even left his holster. Never seen anything like it. None of us had. Don't know about any of the others, but my hand moved away from my belt. I didn't want there to be any thinking I had an interest in pulling. Leo nodded his agreement, and Timothy added, Me too. Been riding for a long time. Seen plenty of men good with a gun. But I ain't never seen nobody pull like that. Huck and the other Circle CM men remained silent, taking in this huge piece of news. Huck felt tremendous relief, but it was mixed with an anger at not having been there when his family needed him. He was unable to shake the image of his little sister taking up a gun, though he knew she was capable of it since she wasn't scared of anything or anyone, just like her mother. Huck broke the silence. So what happened next, and what's the Circle Y? Hank answered. Hey, what is Randolph? He was Clint's top man. He rode forward towards your father, though I can tell you his hand was nowhere near his gun. Now your father had said to the 9 of us that if we swore this was over and that we'd never attack the Circle CM again, he'd let it go. Or he said that starting fresh sounded good to him. We all quickly and happily agreed. Huck responded. That sounds like good news, but what's the Boxed Y and what happened to the Boxed X? Hey, turns out Clint had no family and no will. Didn't leave the ranch to anyone. Guess a man like that figures he's never going to die, and even if he does, he doesn't care about anyone after. Circus judge was riding through town a couple weeks later. Hey, he said maybe the flowers thing was for those of us who'd ridden for the brand to take over the ranch. Otis, he's in charge now, but the ranch is all of ours. Never thought I'd own anything more than my gun, my saddle, and my horse. so this is an odd thing for all of us. You'll learn when you get home that all ranches work together now. A few of the men still wanted to fight, but we've run 'em off, and they ain't been seen since. We're down there to pick up some supplies, more than we can get in Bozeman." Huck looked at each of the three men, still reeling from the news. "You all swear this is the truth?" Each man nodded. "You know, if I find," Timothy spoke.
"Huck, all of you. I can see why you might doubt us, but every word's true, especially about how fast your father is."
Tom, who hadn't said a word, stood up, reached out his hand to Timothy, and said, "Gentlemen, it sounds like a tall tale to me, but I can't see how you'd make it up. Only way you'd know how fast Brock could shoot or how easily he could stare down 9 of you if it happened. Same thing with little Annabelle grabbing a rifle and taking a stand. I think it's best we start fresh. Sure beats the hell out of another gunfight." Timothy took Tom's hand, and when it was over, the men had shaken hands all the way around. After they'd sat back down, Harry asked, "How's it feel? Cowhands all in your lives and now owning a piece of, from what I understand, a very large ranch." Leo, who'd stayed quiet the whole time, was the one who answered. "It is a big ranch, but not as big as it was. Turns out Beck was in serious money trouble, and died owning quite a few people quite a bit of money. Otis is running the ranch, and he should. But they put me in charge of the money. Always been good with figures. Wasn't sure how we could pay our debts and still operate the ranch. Huck, your father came to us, offered a fair price per acre, and said he'd buy as many as it took to get us out of debt. We added it up, and your father was as good as his word. Now we're a bit smaller, but none of us owes another man $1. And your ranch, the CM, well, it got a bit bigger." This time it was Jimmy who spoke. "It used to be the Boxed X, and now it's the Boxed Y." "Well, why?" Leo spoke again. "That was Timothy. Said the Boxed X and was done. He wanted to see what came next, and since Y comes after." The 7 men laughed, and new friendships were born. Chapter 20. Plans. Huck knew this was excellent news, and after what had happened in Cheyenne, and now with the loss of Vigneto and the injury of Cisco, he knew he needed some good news, and assumed everyone else did as well. It seemed to Huck that it was only a matter of time before there would have been an all-out range war with the Boxed X. To have it end with only the death of Clint Beck, a man Huck thought the world was better off without, was going to make building the ranch and the town that much easier. He excused himself from the table and went upstairs to check on Cisco and the others. While Sarah and Maddie didn't fully understand the implications of Clint's death, Cisco and Maria did, and were relieved. Cisco remarked, "It will be good to only worry about the weather and the giant bears." Sarah asked,
"How bad of a man was he, this Mr. Beck?"
Huck and Cisco exchanged a glance before Huck began. "I didn't know the man personally, though I have met others like him. He was big and strong and smart. These are not bad traits in a man, but at some point he became greedy and violent. Maybe he always was. Think of a man like Denny Kramer, only with brains, money, and power. There's a woman you'll meet when we arrive home. Her name is Katie Warner. She is beautiful and smart. She also owns the second biggest ranch in Montana Territory, the Square M. Not only did Katie infuriate Beck by refusing his frequent marriage proposals, some might call them demands, but in his mind she insulted him with her ranch grew to be larger than his. I heard her tell my mother that she thought Beck was going mad. Maybe he was. Anyway, Beck's gone now, and that's a good thing. A good thing for all of us. The men I just met, they seem like good men, anxious to put the X behind them and live their new lives, riding for the Boxed Y. I have no doubt they are doing so with my mother and father's blessing. Also, one other thing. Katie has a sister, Claire. That is the one Tom is sweet on. He'll deny it, but it's true, and he can't hide it. She's a wildcat, though, and while I think she also has an eye for Tom, he's going to have to work to earn her hand." Maria laughed, which was great for everyone to hear, and added,
"She is a beauty. She reminds me of my sister, Kat. A tough woman to catch, but worth it if you can."
Tom, who had come upstairs and caught the tail end of the conversation while standing just outside the door, stepped into the room. "With everything that is happening, this is what you choose to talk about?" Maddie looked at Tom, and then Huck, saying as she did,
Oh, Huck, you are so right.
Tom's face reddened, and he was relieved when Harry and Jimmy followed him into the room a minute later. The two looked around, and Jimmy said, "It looks like we walked in on something. Good to see some smiles. As long as we have another day or so before we leave, I was thinking we should probably do some shopping. We'll need to outfit the wagon for Cisco so we can lie down. Probably best Maria rides with him. Now that Maddie and Sarah have become pretty good with the wagon, we'll let them handle that. The four of us," he looked at Harry, Huck, and Tom, "will ride horses and keep a lookout. Huck says we're entering Sioux territory, so it's best we be prepared. Clean rifles, plenty of ammunition, and enough food and water in case we need to hunker down for a few days." Huck nodded and began to add to the planning. "Tom, why don't you head down to the livery? Make sure the wagon's going to be ready and buy 2 extra horses. I don't want to have—" He stopped, not having meant to upset Maria, but she knew what he meant and told him to continue. Taking Cisco's hand, she did. I'm sorry, Maria. I didn't—"
It is okay, Huck. It is also true, and good planning.
"Okay, thanks. While Tom's doing that, Sarah, you, Jimmy, and Harry, please head down to the general store and pick up some supplies. Plenty to get us home and any extras you see that we'll need once we're there. Make sure everything you buy can fit in the wagon. Need plenty of room for Cisco and Maria. Remember when you're buying that we've almost got 3 weeks coming up on the trail, and though we'll roll through Bozeman before getting home, we need to be prepared. Maddie, maybe you can talk to Cisco and Maria and then find the doc and talk to him. Find out everything we're going to need for Cisco for the trip home. And after we get there, then meet the others at the general store, and we'll get everything ready for when we leave." Sarah looked at Huck and asked,
"What are you going to be doing?"
Huck looked at his fiancée and said, "I have a stop to make." The others could tell that Huck didn't want to share what he was planning to do, and it bothered Sarah. But she respected his obvious need for privacy, and knew he would explain when he was ready. No one else said anything. They walked downstairs together, and when they reached the front door, everyone but Huck turned to the right, leading them to the livery in the general store. Huck turned left. He walked to the far end of town and looked up at a simple sign. Found what he was looking for. The sign had a single word, and not even a name. Undertaker. Chapter 21. Kentucky. Once Huck finished what needed to be done, he turned and walked back toward the hotel. He didn't see any of the others as he came inside, so he decided to sit in the restaurant, enjoy a quiet moment, and have a cup of coffee while he waited. It was only then he remembered the letter he'd been handed in the general store. Meeting the men from the Boxed Y had been his focus in that moment, and he'd forgotten about the letter. He reached into his back pocket and was surprised to find it was addressed to him. He was even more surprised to see it had been sent from Hardyville. That was a place Huck hadn't thought of in a while. He remembered that it was located along the Colorado River in Arizona Territory, a small town that mostly served gold and silver miners who were just starting out, heading into the desert full of dreams and hopes, or those returning. Their dreams and hopes having been crushed by the realities of brutal summers, brutal winters, outlaws, Indians, and disease. It was also where he and Brock had met Dario, the man who ran Dario's mercantile and who gave that up to follow them to Montana. It was also where he and Brock had brought 3 murderous outlaws to justice for massacring 4 helpless Hopi Indians, including a woman and her infant son. One of the 3 they'd had to kill on the way from Hardyville to Fort Mojave, an army outpost also alongside the Colorado. The other 2 came to trial at Fort Mojave. It was where Huck and Brock met then Major Calderwood of the United States Army, and then Circuit Court Judge A.F. Ball. Both these men, now known simply as Kevin Calderwood and Alex Ball, were waiting in Montana, having become what Huck had come to believe would be an always growing extended family. Huck opened the letter slowly but found the single page to have survived the trip from Hardyville to Casper. It was dated a month previous. "Huck, my name is Randolph Vance, though everyone calls me Randy. We do not know each other. But I understand you are traveling with the man who ran the store before me, Dario. Standing in front of me is an Indian from the Havasupai tribe in the Grand Canyon. He says the 2 of you are friends, and he has asked me to write this letter. While his English is surprisingly good, he cannot read nor write, at least not English. He said the trip home took almost a month, but he was safe and did not go hungry. I'm not sure I understood, but if I did, he traveled almost 700 miles by himself from Colorado Territory. You have an impressive friend. It sounds as if all is well with his people. Your other friend, Tochipa, also made it back safely and is doing well too. I believe his father is the chief, a man named Manakaja. They all miss you and what sounds like a very large family. They especially miss a woman called Pukehe. I guess she married your grandfather? I'm not sure I'm getting all this right, but I'm trying and I think I'm close. He wants me to tell you that the canyon is much smaller than he remembers, though it is still beautiful and still home to his people. The chief is staying, along with most of the tribe, but he knows that their days are few. He said to tell you that Tochipa knows all of this, but is still staying with his father and their people. He said to tell you that he's going to leave the canyon and travel back to your ranch. He hopes he will be welcome, but his time here is past. He said it is close to 1,000 miles and would take at least 2 months. He also will not be leaving for a month or two because he wants to help with the spring hunt and leave plenty of meat and jerky for his people. He has told me stories about you and your family, the places you have been, the things you've seen, the battles you fought. He told me about a grizzly bear. I have never seen one, but when he was done, I have no desire to ever see one. He's left now. He came for supplies for his people. They come about every 3 months, them and the Hopi. They bring furs and baskets to trade, and are always friendly. I hope this letter finds you, and I hope your friend makes it all the way to your ranch. The way he described it, it sounds a little bit like heaven. I like the river here, but the desert, I don't know how long I can stay. Oh, and he said to tell your folks and someone named Tom that he says hello. Brandy Vance, Dario's Mercantile, Hardyville. Huck could hardly have been happier than to think his friend was returning. He'd never let himself hope for that, since Kentucky was so loyal to his people. But since he had the chief's blessing, he would be returning with a light heart. He wished that Tochipa would too, but he understood how, as a chief's son, he felt he had to stay. Huck also understood what Kentucky meant when he said the canyon seemed small. This was how he felt when he, Kentucky, and Tom had visited Dry Springs on their way to Abilene, when they picked up Sarah. Even though the town had grown and even prospered, Huck knew right away it was no longer home, at least not for him. That wasn't a bad thing, but he had seen too much since he'd first left. He guessed that was how Kentucky felt, even as beautiful as magnificent as the canyon was. Huck gently folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. He paid for the coffee and was just standing up when his friends walked into the lobby. Huck walked over to meet them and handed Tom the letter as he did. Read it when you get a chance. I think you'll like it. Chapter 22. Open Spaces. As planned, they had ridden and rolled out of Casper 2 days later. It had taken some creativity to pack everything into the wagon, and still leave enough room for Cisco and Maria, but they had gotten it done. They'd been on the trail for 3 days, and had been blessed with excellent weather. It was sunny but cool. No rain nor snow. The terrain was flat, which meant they had good views of everything around them. It was both beautiful and made things a bit safer. For the first day or two, Huck and the others had felt relatively safe, mostly because they were still so close to Casper. But as each mile passed, he knew they were more likely to run into danger in the forms of outlaws or Indians. The Sioux had been making their way west back into the territory, and much blood had been spilled. Huck felt it was his job to see that none of the blood came from anyone in his party. At the same time, he'd taken advantage of the time to teach Sarah how to ride. She and Maddie had become very good with the wagon and took turns with the reins. But Sarah wanted to learn how to ride, really ride. She'd done a little in Abilene, but it was all gentle riding close to or in town. Harry was happy to spend some time in the wagon with Maddie, so he traded places with his daughter, sometimes for hours. Huck was impressed, and admitting this only to himself, a little surprised, at how quickly and easily Sarah learned. By the end of the second day, she was galloping at full speed, laughing loudly as she did. Huck made sure they stayed close to the wagon since his primary responsibility was the safety of the group, but a couple of times they rode a mile or two away. As the sun set on the third day, Sarah turned to Huck and said,
Huck, I love this life. Will it always be like this?
Huck smiled at his fiancée and answered, "In part, yes. It will always be like this. Living outside of a town is different than living in one. Where we're going is just as open as this and maybe even prettier. There is more land and fewer people than you are used to. That can be good and bad. We have freedoms that those who live in towns don't have. There is a beauty to the solitude and the quiet. But Sarah, it also means we only have ourselves to rely on. There are no doctors when we get sick, no sheriffs or marshals to turn to if there's trouble. No restaurants or general stores or shops, and at least not without a few days' ride. There are outlaws and Indians. You heard of what happened to my father and the men who owned the boxed X. That was something we had to take care of ourselves. The Sioux are making trouble, more every day, and we're going to have to deal with that. The weather is worse than you're used to, especially in the winter. But Sarah, it is worth it. Worth the risk and the danger. I don't think I could ever live in a big city. I haven't yet, but I have visited more than a couple of larger towns and I felt suffocated. I don't think I could even live in a town again. I loved living in Dry Springs, but there is something about knowing everything that needs to be done, you need to do, that every day is a struggle, a danger, and a joy. I don't know how to explain it. I can only hope you love it as much as I do." She took his hand and looked into his eyes, saying,
I think you have explained it perfectly, and I am sure that I will love it as much as you do, as much as I love you.
Before Huck could say anything, Maddie spoke.
Forgive me, but I couldn't help it over here. Where we are going, is it really as remote as you say?
This got everyone's attention, and Huck looked around before answering. "It is. You're originally from Pittsburgh, right?"
Yes, I am.
"I've never been back east. Never seen what you would call a city. Biggest place I've ever seen was Los Angeles in California. Didn't live there, just traveled through, but they say there are 5,000 people living there. How many people live in Pittsburgh?"
My father said we have more than 80,000 people.
Huck whistled and added, "Whew, I haven't seen 80,000 people in my entire life. I hadn't seen maybe 10,000 people." Huck turned to Harry. "How many people would you say live in Abilene?" "In town? We have 2,000 or more, maybe getting close to 3,000 if you count the surrounding ranches or farms. Also have about 5,000 cowboys come through each of the last couple of years." Huck nodded and continued, "Maddie, where we're going, there are about 30 people, counting everyone here. We have some ranches close, and by close I mean a half day to a couple of days' ride. And we're building a town just a handful of miles away from the main ranch. But I wouldn't think that town would have 100 people living in it, at least for a couple of years. Biggest town close to us is Bozeman. It's a 3 or 4 day ride, and I'm guessing there's less than 200 people living there. Bunch more on the ranches around there, places like ours, but nothing like what you've seen." Maddie looked around, and no one could tell if she was happy or concerned.
30 people? Counting us?
Huck answered, "Yep."
I had more than 30 students in my school back in Pennsylvania.
It was Harry who spoke next. "Jimmy, didn't you tell your fiancée what she was getting herself in before you packed her up and headed north?" Before Jimmy could answer, Maddie did while laughing.
No, Harry, he told me. I'm not sure I understood, but he told me. Thing is, until today, until tonight, until right now, I really didn't know what that meant. I'd never seen anything like this. We've been riding for 3 days and we haven't even seen another person. Not one.
Jimmy started to look concerned, then turned to face his fiancée. "Maddie," she smiled, took his hand, and said,
Jimmy, I've never seen anything more beautiful, been more excited, or felt more alive than I do right now. Thank you for bringing me.
Jimmy wanted to be happy, but for the moment he was just tremendously relieved. Chapter 23. Burial. The following morning, they'd been moving for less than an hour, when suddenly Maddie and Sarah heard a gasp from Maria. Fearing something had happened with Cisco, they stopped the wagon, and within seconds all 4 men had ridden close, rifles ready. Sarah looked at Cisco and didn't see anything different than she'd seen for the past few days, but still she asked,
Cisco, are you okay?
"Yes, I am fine. It's my
What's wrong, Maria?
By now, Maria was crying, close to sobbing, though she was obviously trying not to. The way she sat in the wagon, her back leaning against the front boards, she could only see what was behind them, what they had already rolled past. Unable to speak, she simply pointed back and to the left. With tremendous effort, enough to cause him quite a bit of pain, Cisco sat upright. He looked back and instantly, it was obvious he was hurting too.
It is our nieto.
He pointed in the same direction as Maria.
He is buried there.
Sarah and Maddie locked the wagon in place and quickly climbed into the back, squeezing out enough room so they could both hold and comfort Maria. Huck turned Spirit and took off toward the spot, followed by Tom. Jimmy and Harry stayed close to the wagon. The little burial spot was under one of the only trees in the area. He was not buried deeply, and the grave was covered with a few rocks. There were signs the scavengers had tried to get to Nieto, but the rocks Maria had stacked had done their job. Huck turned to Tom, saying, "We have 2 shovels in the wagon. Please go get them and ask the others to wait." Without a word, Tom did as he was asked, and was back in only a couple of minutes. Knowing what Huck had in mind, he slipped off his horse, handing one of the shovels to Huck, who was already on the ground. They started work, digging a proper grave. The ground was not soft, and it took almost an hour. As hard as it was not nearly as hard as having to dig up Nieto's broken body and place it in the new grave. They carefully covered him, and then, as Maria had done, covered the grave with rocks. When they were finally done, Huck rode back and asked everyone to join them. The ground was flat enough that the wagon had no trouble, and soon everyone except Cisco was standing around the freshly dug grave. Cisco insisted that Huck and Tom help him down from the wagon. Maria, Sarah, and Maddie argued that he shouldn't, that the doctor said he shouldn't stand for weeks, but he insisted. A man should never have to see his child buried, but if he does, he needs to stand and show the child and God the respect. The women had nothing more to say. It wound up taking all 4 men to get Cisco to the ground. Using the wagon to keep himself upright, with tears rolling down his face, he started to speak. My dear Nieto, I'm so sorry this happened and that you died. I knew the riding was dangerous, but it made you so happy. I never could say no to you. You were the best little boy any man could ask for. I wish you had known your real father, Boa. He was a great man and my best friend. He had such dreams for you and your mother, and he would have made them come true. He was smart and brave, just like you, Nieto. He would have loved you so much, just like I did. Your mother is here, and Nieto. She is even braver than your father. No mother ever loved a child more than she loved you, little man. We are going to have a baby, Nieto. You should have had a baby brother, or maybe a baby sister. You wouldn't have been the baby anymore. I know you would have loved and taught the baby so much. How to play, how to love, how to feed the chickens, how to sneak hard candies when you didn't think we were looking. The tears overtook Cisco and he stopped, held on one side by Huck and the other side by Tom. They didn't notice at first, but soon everyone realized that Maria was talking. She was talking very quietly in Spanish, which none of them except Cisco understood. Every once in a while, they would hear her say Cisco, Boa, or Nieto, but the rest was between her, Cisco, and Nieto, as it should be. When she was done, and before they loaded Cisco back into the wagon, Huck asked Harry to take his place holding Cisco upright, and signaled for Jimmy to help him with something in the wagon. It was in the very back, wrapped in blankets, and when they went to move it, Jimmy was surprised by how heavy it was. But when the blanket slipped off, he saw and understood. They worked it toward the front of the wagon. Then both jumped down and lifted it up, carrying it very gently to where Nieto lay buried. The others could now see that it was a headstone. It was arched and cut out of marble. It was why Huck had gone to the undertaker. They placed it on top of the grave, moving the rock so that it fit and was raised above everything else. It said, Nieto Hinojosa, 1868 to 1873. Loving son of Cisco, Maria, and Poa. Chapter 24. Dust. The rest of the day, while as beautiful as the previous days had been, didn't feel like that to any of the travelers. The sun's warmth did not seem to reach as deep. Food tasted bland, and conversation, when there was any, was short, humorless, and functional. The reason was obvious. Nieto. They had all known he'd been killed. They had grieved for him, as well as Cisco and Maria. But somehow, seeing the tiny little grave, knowing he'd been out there all by himself, and now would be forever, hit them much harder than any of them had expected. In a way, Maria seemed more upset now than when they first saw her in Casper. Huck thought it might have been that because, before that, she had been forced to focus on saving Cisco, and then on his recovery, and wasn't allowed the kind of grieving a mother needs. Either Sarah or Maddie was in the wagon with her most of the time, since even the effort to get out of the wagon for a few minutes set Cisco back, and he had been sleeping since they left the gravesite. Huck signaled for Tom, Harry, and Jimmy to join him at the point. When the four were gathered, he looked back at the wagon, with Maddie on the reins and the other three in the back. "All right, I know this is hard on everyone, but the farther we are from Casper, the more danger we're in. While I understand what they are going through, maybe I don't, but I'm trying. Doesn't matter, though. We can't let those on the wagon be, but we have to pay even more attention to the things around us. Tom and I have been attacked by both outlaws and Indians on this very trail, and it would take incredibly good fortune for that not to happen again. Harry, Jimmy, you're both good men, and I'd feel good having you stand with me in about any situation. But trail life is different than town life, and trail problems are different than town problems." Harry asked. "Huck, what are you asking from us? What's different?" "Outlaws. They're actually more obvious here than in town. In town, you knew most everyone, and you learned to trust them and to trust their friends. You know the ones who live in town and that you need to be careful of, and you can pay attention to anyone who's new. Out here, it's best you assume the worst in people. Hate to say that, but it's true. We've met good people on the trail, but Brock taught me to keep my eyes open and my hand near my gun till I knew for sure. You see a group of men riding together, no women, no children? Expect them to cause some trouble until they're long gone, or you get to know them well enough to trust them. Even then, be careful. Other thing is, in town, you can count on some help from the people who live there. Out here, it's just us. Just the four of us. And we can't all be together all the time." Jimmy nodded his understanding and asked, "And Indians?" "Worse. They're quieter and sneakier than anyone you've ever met in town. At least the bad ones are. There are good Indians, and I've met plenty, but I've also met enough of the others that I sleep every night on the trail, with one eye open, sometimes two. They can hide in places you'd never think they could. They can ride better than any of us. They don't usually have good weapons, but they're good with what they have. They don't have any rules. Kill you any way they can. Kill women and children as easy as you'd kill a sick dog. Jimmy, you're gonna have a tough talk with Maddie. Make sure she has a gun with her at all times. If things go terrible and we're gonna be run over, she's gonna have to use it rather than be taken. You understand?" Jimmy just sat there for a moment. His jaw dropped and the others could see him thinking about what Huck had said. I do. I mean, I guess I do. Never thought about that before. Sarah? Maria?" Huck answered. "Maria knows. She's been out here before. Sarah? I'm going to talk to her when we stop. Thing is, starting now, we got to be looking at all times. We'll ride closer to the wagon, one on each side, one out in front, and one tailing. You see anything different, anything that catches your attention, ride back toward the wagon, but slowly. Won't do to let them know you've seen something. Now, I'll take point. Most likely they'll be waiting for us. Tom will drag behind in case they try and come up behind us. That's likely coming at us from the sides, but that don't mean they won't. We've got about 3 hours till the sun sets. First good spot I find, we'll stop and set up for the night. Best to eat and have camp ready before dark. Starting tonight, we'll each be on watch. 2 at a time. Half night's sleep for each of us. We'll be tired, but having 2 guards is important. If you don't have any questions, let's get going. Stay close enough you can see 2 of us at all times and never let the wagon out of your sight." 90 minutes later, Huck pulled up and waited for the wagon and the other 3 riders to join. When they did, he said, "This'll do for tonight. Small hill here can tuck the wagon next to, and one of the guards can stay on top. It was a good view all around. Sarah, Maddie, starting now, you'll be in charge of meals. Tom, Jimmy, you stay here. Look after your horses and keep your eyes open. Harry, you come with me. We'll ride for a bit and have a look around. Jimmy, you need to talk to Maddie. Everyone understood and got to work. Harry and Tom started to ride, and they hadn't gotten far at all when Harry said, Huck, my old eyes might be getting bad, but if you look east a little bit, you see some dust rising? Could be a small desert wind, but... Huck pulled up and stared in the direction Harry pointed. It's not like any wind I've ever seen. Best we head back. Chapter 25. Visitors. Harry and Huck pulled back into the makeshift camp, surprising everyone and concerning some. Huck pulled everyone together around the wagon. I was hoping this wasn't going to happen at all, and certainly not this soon, but we've got visitors on the way. Sarah and Maddie gasped, but Maria had been through too much in the past few years and would wait before growing too concerned. When Huck pointed east, they could all see the dust and could tell it was coming directly for them. Huck continued. Just from what we've seen, we note a few things. First, and this is good news, it's not Indians. No way they'd be riding straight at us, and no way they'd be giving us such an obvious sign. We don't know how many, and we don't know what they want, if anything. Might just be traveling through, no different than us. Might be trouble. Until we know, we'll assume it's trouble. Jimmy, you take a rifle and climb on top of that small hill. Don't come down unless we call you, and stay out of sight. Whoever's coming might not be the only ones, so you'll need to keep a lookout for others, as well as watching what's happening here. You'll be the only one on lookout, so be careful. Harry, I want you up in the wagon with Cisco and Maria. Sarah and Maddie, quickly heat up some beans and steak, but when these folks get here, make your way back to the wagon. Tom, you'll stay between the wagon and whoever rides in. You can sit and eat, but don't let them get between you and the wagon. I'm staying right here by the fire. If they don't start any trouble, I'll offer them something to eat, but I'll make sure that after that, they're on their way. No one's staying here with us. Questions? Cisco's head slowly lifted over the top of the wagon. By his face, they could all tell how much it hurt to do so. He looked at Huck. Where is my gun? Huck started to answer, but Maria, with pride in her voice, said, I'll get to my husband his gun. Jimmy started for the top of the little hill. Sarah and Maddie started cooking, and Harry, Huck, and Tom checked their weapons. 20 minutes later, the two men rode close enough to be seen. Huck and Tom set down their plates and adjusted their gun belts as one of the men called out, Hello, the camp. Like to ride in. Huck called back, You're welcome to. We'll block in those horses and keep your hands where we can see them. The same man yelled again, Not sounding too friendly. Huck immediately answered, Don't know you and wasn't expecting anyone. If you don't like my manners, you're welcome to keep riding. If you're friendly and hungry, you can join us. But like I said, walking in with your hands empty except for your horse's reins. Up to you. We're coming in. The two men walked in, each with one hand on the rein and the other one clear and empty. Huck looked at them and said, You can tie 'em off on the wagon or stake 'em if you prefer. Got plenty of beans and antelope steak if you're interested. The second of the two men answered, Well, thank you, mister. We're plenty hungry. I think we'll stake the horses, let 'em eat at the same time we do. Once they staked the horses, they walked into camp, hands empty. The second one said, My name's Bart, and this is Owen. Huck introduced everybody except Jimmy, who was lying down on top of the hill, hopefully out of sight, as Huck had warned him. He handed both men a plate and a fork and pointed to the food staying warm over the fire. They each dished up a plate and took a seat. Tom joined them around the fire as Huck asked, Where are you boys headed? Bart answered, South, Casper. After that, Texas. Where are you coming from? Up north. Did some trapping around the Fort Peck Reservation close to Canada. Good trapping? There was, but time to head back to Texas. It's a mite too cold for us up there. How about you? Which way you going? Head north. It's pretty up there. Guess Bozeman's our next stop. The four men finished their meals in silence. Huck noticed that the two men took in everything about the camp and more than once caught them staring at the wagon. It could have been the supplies or the women, or maybe both, that caught their interest. But Huck didn't like the way they looked. He certainly didn't get a good feeling about either man. though neither had said anything aggressive or offensive. Still, didn't hurt to be cautious. As they finished up their dinner, Huck stood up and Tom did the same. Bart said, "Thanks for the chow. Tasted plenty good." "You're welcome. Looks like your horses got their fill too. About time for you boys to be riding on now. Hope the rest of your trip is safe." Owen looked around and said, "Thought maybe we'd sleep here tonight. Heard there's engines around and maybe we'd all be safer that way." Huck shook his head and answered, "Thanks, but we'll take our chances. Again, you have a safe ride." Huck watched as the smiles left Bart's and Owen's faces, if only for a moment. What he saw was ugly. Owen looked directly at Huck. "Doesn't seem too friendly." "We fed you, and that seems plenty friendly to me. It's a big territory. You won't have trouble finding a place to sleep." As Bart and Owen turned toward their horses, Owen looked back over his shoulder without even a hint of a smile, said, "Maybe we'll see you again." They gathered up their horses and rode out, back east the way they came. When they were out of earshot, Huck waved Jimmy down. When everyone was gathered again around the wagon, Huck spoke. "We'll see those men again. There'll be others with them, and they won't be as friendly." Sarah asked,
"How do you know?"
"They said they were coming from the north, but rode in from the east. They didn't have any bedrolls, any packed food, and certainly no signs of being trappers. That means it's all waiting for them somewhere, and there's no reason to have left it, unless someone was watching it. When they left, they headed back the way they came, not south like they said. No, there's others out there, and those two were scouting us. Don't know if it'll be tonight or if they'll wait till morning. They'll be back." Chapter 26. Ready. Huck watched until the men were out of sight. When they were, he turned back to the group saying, "It's too late for us to leave tonight. We wouldn't be able to outrun them anyway. I'm tempted for a couple of us to follow them and maybe take care of it before they can come back. But if we don't know how many there are, and I hate to split us up. So we're going to keep this simple. We'll clear some stuff out of the back of the wagon, make enough room for Sarah and Maddie to sleep up there with Cisco and Maria. Rifles for everyone. Harry, you and Tom will spend the night on top of the hill. If one of you gets tired, go ahead and catch a little nap, but the other needs to keep watching. If they do come back, no guarantee it'll be from the same direction, or that they won't split up and come back from more than one direction. Jimmy, you and I will wait and watch right here. The wagon should be pretty safe and we'll stay between it and the plains. I figure there's 4, maybe 5 of them. When they come back, they won't be nice and nicely to come into camp." Everyone was looking at each other and then back to Huck. Maddie asked,
"Are you sure they're coming back?"
"I'm not, but if I was sitting at a table, I'd bet a lot that they would be. Nothing about them seemed right. We have plenty of things here to attract their attention." Jimmy asked, "How do we know when to fire?" Huck looked at Jimmy and then Tom. "Tom, you remember those rustlers we were pushing the cattle?" "Of course. Remember how Gus taught us you can't give men like that a chance? That they'd been warned and how as soon as we saw them we started firing?" "I do. Well, it's the same thing here. Harry, Jimmy, this is different than in town. No one's going to help us, and there's no need and no time to issue a warning. If these men come back, it'll be with evil intent. I aim to end it before they get a chance to hurt any of us. I'm hoping we won't have to fire at all, but if we do, best if I be the first. But once I start, or any of us does, we all keep shooting until it's over. And now, over means they're all dead." Huck waited as he looked at every member of the group. When no one said anything, he asked, "Does everyone understand? Anyone have a problem or want to discuss this?" Maddie, leaning over the side of the wagon, seemed shocked and asked,
"Are you really going to kill those men if they come back?"
This time it was Tom who answered, "Miss Maddie, we are. We have to. If we don't, they'll kill us or worse. You may not have understood it, but Huck warned them when they were leaving and they heard it too. Huck's right. They do come back, it's to do us harm. Best thing we can do is stop that before they can. I know how you're feeling. I went through it myself not too long ago. But like Huck said, this isn't Abilene or Pittsburgh. This is the prairie. We're alone, except for each other, and we need to take care of ourselves. It's hard, but it's the life we've chosen." Jimmy looked around. "Huck, we should have some time before they come back, if they do, right?" "We do. They rode in from pretty far off. We'll need to ride back, make plans, and then return. They may even wait till morning." "Okay then. Maddie, if you come down from there, maybe we can take a short walk? He turned toward Huck. We'll stay close. I have my rifle and we won't go out of sight. Huck nodded. When Jimmy and Maddie took a walk, Huck helped Sarah down from the wagon and they sat around the fire. Huck took Sarah's hand. Sarah, I know this is a lot to take in. It's different than anything you've ever known. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't imagine it myself. But there really is no other way. I've been thinking, though, maybe this isn't what you signed up for. When this is over, if you want, I'll bring you back to Abilene. I'll understand, I really will. It's not for everyone. Sarah took her other hand and with both, wrapped up Huck's non-gun hand.
When you wrote me that letter, the one that talked about you killing those rustlers, without so much as a warning.
Huck started to interrupt, but Sarah stopped him and kept going.
I know. Gus told them if they followed you, you'd kill them on sight. That they'd have their warnings, and there wouldn't be another one. I cried for 3 nights. I didn't understand. I'd never heard anything like that. It didn't make me question my love for you, but it made me wonder if I was cut out for this life. If I could do what you did or live with you if you had done it over again. On the 4th day, I went to my father and showed him the letter. I told him my thoughts and asked him for his. In my whole life, he's never let me down. It's been me and him since my mom died, and the truth is, Huck, if he said I couldn't have married you, I don't think I would have. But he did give his approval, and when he read your letter, I think it made him feel even stronger about you. He told me that you were right, that things are different out here, and that I need to be okay with that there wasn't always a way, all the time, to have a trial with a jury and a judge. He also told me how much he respected how you struggled with what you did, you and Tom. He said he knew then, beyond any doubt, what kind of man you were and how far you would go to protect me, which he said is a man's job. I'm telling you this because I hate what we're going to have to do, but I understand, and if it comes to it, I'll be right by your side. I'll reload your guns, I'll patch anyone up who gets hurt, and they get close enough. Here she pulled out an 1849 Colt pocket pistol. I'll shoot him myself. Harry was teaching me while you were gone.
Huck shook his head in surprise and said, That was my first gun. Where?
My father. He said I should have it. I should have told you sooner, but I just didn't think about it until tonight. I know my father is having this same talk with Maddie right now, and maybe she'll stay and maybe she'll need to go back. If not all the way to Pittsburgh, at least back to Abilene. But me? I'm with the man I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. It's the life I've chosen, and one we'll build together.
Huck wrapped his arms around Sarah and wondered how he had gotten so lucky.
This concludes the story of Abilene Ambush by Scott Harris. We hope you have enjoyed this story. You can find more books by Scott Harris on Amazon, available for Kindle and in paperback. This story has been brought to you by Dusty Saddles Publishing, home of the best-selling authors in the Western genre. Visit our website at dspublishingnetwork.com. Please hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and leave us a comment if you've enjoyed listening to this story. Till next time, happy trails.